Hello everybody, this is another in my series of videos about trying to make a pretty good French horn out of some junky parts. In my first two videos, we took apart a couple French horns and we found a combination of parts that seemed to work pretty well, and here it is, taped together with duct tape. We could just leave it like that and take it out on the gig, but I don't know. Maybe we better see if we can put it together and make it look like we intended it to be this way. I'm noticing and looking at how this horn is going to have to go together that there's four important critical points that need to be pretty well done. One of them is that on this crispy style wrap, the bell has to go in between the main tuning slide and the auxiliary F slide, so it's going to be a good fit there. And of course, as I mentioned before, it's always important that the third valve slides come out. We all know as French horn players the importance of that third B-flat slide. And in addition to that, the bell has to meet the valve section at a pretty good angle. And on this particular horn, the thumb valve is very close to the bell, and so that has to be a good fit as well. Did a lot of trying on those lead pipes in the last week, and I discovered this really cool way to cut a piece of tubing off this fuel transfer tube. Hey, remember back in the 70s when stealing people's gasoline from the tanks was a thing? Not that I ever did it, but cut off a little piece of tubing, and using these needle nose pliers, I managed to stretch out the tubing a little bit. And with a little bit of grease, I slid the tube over the lead pipe receiver on the horn. And I put the lead pipe in there, and it made a very, very nice seal. The thing I noticed in trying out lead pipes with electrician's tape was that I was having trouble playing the low B flat. You know the B flat I'm talking about. It starts Ein Heldenleben. Well, without that note on the horn, it leads to some very short auditions. Now look at this. I was worried if I was actually going anyplace with this horn and if I really wasn't making it better. But look what I found in my closet. Another one, just like the first one. It's even marked with the same JL notification. And by trying out this horn, I was able to determine that, yes, we're doing some good here. The horn is actually better than it was before. So I guess I better take the horn apart, take off all this tape. I'll just speed things up a bit. So here's what we got here. We got this bell section, and it has a lot of dents in it. Do dents matter? I really don't know if they do. I don't know if they affect the playing qualities or not. I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on whether dents matter. If they're very, very bad, like this one is, then it's probably best if it comes out. This bell also is not very round down here. It's kind of shaped like a football. Also on this bell, looks like somebody used some abrasive cleaner on the bell, even though it's lacquered, and that's probably not a good idea. This is a King, and King lacquer is very, very tough. It's very difficult to get off. Inside the bell you can see some kind of corrosion that's taking place underneath the lacquer. That's going to be hard to get out as well. I think the first thing I'm going to do is to get off all the old solder. You see, when I took this horn apart, there's still a lot of solder left on the instrument that's going to make dent removal and cleaning difficult, and I think it just looks better if I take off some of the solder. So I get out my torch, and I'm going to melt the old solder off, try to make the horn bell look a little better. Now on this particular instrument, there is on the top of the bell an additional piece of metal that goes under the hand called the hand guard. And this hand guard and the bell underneath it are, well, they're flattened out. They're quite flat. And I'm not going to be able to get out that flatness without removing the hand guard. The hand guard is a long piece of metal, and there's a lot of solder underneath that all has to be heated up at the same time before I can get that hand guard off. Now that was very satisfying. All that solder that's underneath there needs to come off. Now after this, we're going to do a little bit of work on the dents in the bell. And when it comes to dents, this really is something that you should go to your local repairman to do. Because dent removal requires, well, to begin with, it requires a lot of very expensive tools that can only be used for one purpose, which means that you have to invest a lot of money in weirdly shaped tools that only serve one purpose. I got this particular little dent remover for bells used on eBay. I was very lucky to get it. It has a little steel ball that screws on the end of it. It's important that you find the right size ball, I guess. But the other thing about dent removal is that it's a skill that, well, I'm still working on. You see, the thing about a dent is that the metal does not want to return to where it was before. It's pretty happy in the dented shape. When it stretches out in a dent, the brass becomes a little bit harder. And so when you try to push out a dent with, say, a teaspoon or something like that, what you tend to do is push out the softer metal that surrounds the dent and not the dent itself. So dents have to be pushed out, well, very carefully and in the right way. What I'm trying to do is find the dent with the dent ball and push it out from inside here. Takes a bit of practice, and I'm not sure I'm very good at it. This really bad dent that I have here is in the worst possible places. Between the bell and where the bell fastens to the valve section, it's quite hard to get out in that spot, but I also suspect that it's been dented there on more than one occasion, and so the metal there is quite hard. It's not going to come out very easily using this device. So this is what this dent looks like. It's actually kind of crumbled as well as dented, and looks like it's buckled a little bit, and that dent is full of solder. A lot of solder, and that solder is going to have to come out before I do anything more. But first, I'm going to try a little quick fix and see if it works. In that box that you see there is a very powerful magnet that I keep all by itself in a box full of paper, far away from any other ferrous metal like steel or iron, or credit cards or computers or anything like that. And I have these steel ball bearings that I'm going to put inside the horn. A lot of steel ball bearings. Some of them are quite small. but a couple of them are pretty big, just big enough to fit inside the tubing, and they're the ones that are going to do the real work. The more ball bearings I can get in there, the more mass I'm going to have flying around in there, removing the dents. In this box is that super magnet, and I have it covered with tape and a piece of plastic to keep it from scratching the brass as I rub it on the outside of the brass instrument. It's going to pull the ball bearings back and forth through the tube, and as they go through the tube, they're going to hopefully bang some of the dents out as they go by. It's a pretty good workout for the biceps. So I'm going to try something else. First of all, I'm going to put on my leather apron, which is going to hopefully keep the French horn bell from sliding around in my lap too much. Then I bought another piece of very inexpensive equipment. Didn't cost very much money. I think it cost about $10, and it's a roller. And what I'm going to try to do is hit down all the spots that have been pushed up. Whenever there's a dent that goes inside the horn, there's another spot that comes out and sticks out from the horn. And if I can push down on those high spots, that will tend to make, the French horn look a little bit like it did before the dent appeared. I'm not very good at this. I'm learning as I go along, and one thing I did discover in doing this work is that it's absolutely pointless to do this one-handed. Little by little, dents are coming out, high spots are going down. The dents aren't as bad as they were before, but that one bad dent is still bugging me, and maybe I've kind of gotten obsessed with it. That solder has got to come out. So one possibility that I might explore here is the idea of annealing that section of the bell. When you anneal metal, you heat it up until it turns a bright color, and then you let it cool down slowly, and when you're done, the metal is, softer than it was before. But before you anneal metal, I have learned from YouTube University that the most important thing is to clean the metal of all lacquer and especially all old solder. Because when you use that kind of heat, the solder burns onto the metal and it's impossible to get off. I know this. So I'm going to try to clean this metal as clean as I can get it. I'm starting off with steel wool. First I put on my glasses so I can see what I'm doing, and then I put on my safety glasses to keep all that steel wool dust out of my eyes. I'm going to try Scotch Guard. You know that stuff you clean your pots and pans with? Well, I got to tell you, steel wool and Scotch Guard just did not stand up to solder. That solder is still on there, and I know that I'm supposed to remove it. So I'm going to do something that you will never see a repairman do. Just a little bit of emery cloth, which is kind of like sandpaper. And it seems to work pretty well. So I'm going to use power tools. And in order to use power tools, it makes a lot of dust, and the dust is pretty bad. So I'm going to mask up. practice lately masking up, but not quite to this extent. And of course, all that stuff flying around, I better put on my... What does that remind you of? Open the pod bay doors, Hal. I have my buffing equipment set up in my back closet, and I have it surrounded with, well, shower curtains to keep the dust down. So I can't really take the video camera in there because it's not very good for the video camera to be in there with all that dust flying around. So I can't show you a lot of what's going on here, but I have something called a sisal wheel, which is pretty abrasive, and I have some waxy abrasive that I put onto the wheel, and I'm going to try to take all of the solder and as much of the lacquer off on the entire bell as I can. That lacquer sure is tough. I think I got all of the solder off, but I'm pretty sure I didn't get too much of the lacquer off. Now, you can see that it's covered with a kind of black stuff. That's the wax from the abrasive, and I need to get that off. I'm going to use some brake cleaner to get that off, because if I use the torch on that thing now, will burn. After I use the brake cleaner, I'm going to wash the bell to get all that brake cleaner off. I'm not sure what kind of fumes that makes. To do annealing, I'm going to replace the nozzle on my torch to something that is a bit bigger. I'm going to get a big area hot as opposed to a very small area hot, which is what I use that small nozzle for. I'll start by getting the whole general area a little hot, and then focus in on the areas that I actually want to soften. I have the lights turned down in my workshop so that I can see when the metal starts to change color. Well, I was supposed to remove all that solder, but I guess I didn't do a very good job, because that solder that was left over is now burned on there, and nothing I have is going to remove that. I have this cool set of dent hammers that I bought, and, well, I'm going to try to bang down a few high spots with these things. I'm not sure if it does any good, but I sure feel like a pro repairman using them. And I'll try that roller again to see if I can get some of these spots down, high spots. Reminds me of that old TV commercial from the 60s. I soaked them out. I scrubbed them out, but I still have a ring around the collar. And then the dent balls go back in and see if it made any difference on that dent. And you know, it did make a big difference. The dent is coming out noticeably. Unfortunately, I did tend to get really obsessed with this particular dent, and that's too bad, because I realized too late that this dent is going to be covered by the hand grip that I'm going to install on the horn, and no one is ever going to see it whether it's there or not. And it used up all the time that I have for horn repair for this week. So I'm going to have to continue working on this horn over the coming week, and next week I'll put out another video about assembling the horn. In the meantime, check out some of my other playlists and music on my channel, The Horn Guild. I'd love it if you subscribe. Thanks for watching.